Alright, this is a how-to video for 4AGE Distributor Rebuild. Thank you, K-Box. You guys have made this Distributor Rebuild Kit for a long time, and it's really good. Alright, so I have the distributor cap off, the plugs disconnected. You need to rotate the engine to TDC on the intake stroke. You can tell it's the intake stroke because these dots will face the top. If you're at TDC exhaust, these dots will face downwards. So TDC intake stroke. I'm going to mark a line here to give me a ballpark of where ignition timing is when I put the distributor back in. And then also, before I take the distributor out, I'm going to loosen it, get these ears get this bolt in the center of the ears, and then I'm going to mark a line in the middle right here. And you'll see when you plug back in the distributor, it wants you to the instructions say like make sure the ears are centered in the bolt holes, and then you have to line up the dot on the gear and the shaft too. So making this line to show you where the center of the bolt holes are, that's going to help us out when we install the distributor. Alright, so I'll take this out and we'll get started. Alright, so I got my scribe and I scribed a line right here. You can use a pen. I don't like to use a pen because I'm gonna wash all this stuff and the ink's gonna wash off. And you can see I scribed the line where this guy is. I have the distributor positioned so that the bolt is in the center of this ear adjustment, and so that'll give you about the center of where the distributor is. And again, this will help us out when we reinstall the distributor. So it's hard to tell, but there's two places where the distributor can leak from. Internally, there's a seal inside here, and then also there's an O-ring where the distributor plugs into the cylinder head. So all that stuff will get replaced. Alright, let's see what's inside this rebuild kit. So I bought this. So every time I've bought this rebuild kit, I've always bought it from Tools R Us, and I'll leave the link in the description. So thank you, Tools R Us, because I bought a lot of stuff from you guys. So we get some O-rings. This should be for here where it goes into the head. This is up top for the distributor cap. This seals what ends up deteriorating and leaks. This seals is what ends up deteriorating and leaks, and that'll go internally in the shaft. We get a roll pin, and that roll pin will replace that guy. And then we also replace the bearing for the distributor shaft also. So today I'm using two different forum guides, or two different guides for the rebuild. One's from Matrix Garage, the other one, shout out to Assassin 10,000, the legend. Every other time I've done this, I've done it Assassin's way, where I've drilled out the roll pin all the way through. And then Matrix Garage, brand new, he suggests get a 5 or 6 mil drill bit and just drill just until it touches the gear, and then use a punch to punch it all the way out. I think I'm gonna try it this way because I'm just that kind of person where it's like I always have a tough time center punching this thing exactly in the center, and then getting a straight shot all the way through. I always mess up, so I'm gonna try it the Matrix Garage way today. So I have my Harbor Freight center punch. I center punch that guy. Of course, because it's me, it's not all the way in the middle. But yeah, we'll try to punch this out and then we'll come back. Alright, I think today's the first day in history that I've ever successfully drilled all the way through without drama. You can see that hole's all the way through that pin, and how I have this thing chucked up, just enough to grip this guy, and I'm not squishing the shit out of this thing. I'm still going to use the 5mm and drill it just until it touches the gear, just to show you guys. So yeah, I'll drill this out and then I'll show you how I punch this roll pin out. Alright, I'm having a really tough time getting that pin out. So I ended up drilling it all the way up to a 9/64 drill bit, and it's drilled all the way through. I'll usually have it set up like this and then punch the pin most of the way through, and then I'll set it up this way and then punch the pin all the way through. Yeah, this is really difficult. So here's what usually ends up happening for me. So this metal's so thin now in that roll pin, I'm gonna use my bearing splitter and just pull this off. That little bit of roll pin just gonna break off, and then we'll be able to get all the residue out. So yeah, I'll put this in my press and I'll press this off. Press is highly recommended. If you do not have a press, you can also use a bearing puller and pusher tool. I have one from Harbor Freight. I'll show you guys. Yeah, we'll be back. Before you even take that gear off, make sure the gear and the shaft orientation. Luckily, I have this reman starter here to reference. So that dot, when it faces up, that the first reluctor tooth needs to face up too. So that gear will go on both ways, but remember that dot faces up and then the reluctor tooth faces up also. Alright, so I have this guy in my bearing splitter and we're just gonna push that down. And yeah, you can see that metal's really thin, so that took like no force. So we'll clean out the extra stuff and yeah, we'll keep going. Alright, so these are the hold downs for the distributor bearing. You'll see that's one more screw. I had to take out this screw to get my impact screwdriver in there. So Phillips are always easy to strip out. I highly recommend a impact screwdriver just to give these two a whack and then get them loose. And then I just used a regular screwdriver afterwards. But I had to move this out of the way to get my impact screwdriver down in there. We can take this shaft out right now. So that seal right there that came out is usually the culprit. That's why oil gets inside the distributor, so that guy will be replaced. Same thing with the bearing. Before you press the bearing off, you want to measure the distance between that reluctor tooth and the bearing and write it down somewhere so you know how far the new bearing should be pressed on again. All this stuff is going to go in the parts washer. Same thing with this guy because that's disgusting. Here's my Harbor Freight puller and separator installer kit. 62593. That's it. Show you what this guy looks like. So if you don't have a press, this may work also. You may need like a jawed puller to pull some of the bearings and stuff back on, but I highly recommend just use a press. I've done it with no special tools, just a hammer and a punch before, and it turned out very bad. So yeah, If you don't have, highly recommend press. If you don't have a press, puller and installer. Don't experiment like me and just try to use hand tools only. So I pulled the seal off of the shaft right here. That thing's as hard as a rock. So yeah, obviously this wasn't gonna seal everything. This thing can go in the trash. The seal surface, before I install it, I'm gonna hit this with 1000, 1500 to clean up the seal surface. Remember, you need to measure between the reluctor wheel and then the bearing to give you a reference to like how far the new bearing should press on. So we'll do that right now. I'll get a better measurement when I put the camera down, but 6.53 is about where this should be. And that rhymed. But yeah, it's gonna be different on every distributor, so make sure to take this measurement, write it down somewhere. I have my bearing in the bearing splitter set up like this. We're gonna press that bearing off. If you don't have a press, again, you can use a puller tool to pull the bearing off of this. Oh. Alright, so you can see the shiny spot where the bearing sat. That'll give you a guideline to how far you should press that thing on, but always use your measurement for the final for finally pressing the bearing on. You can see right here the seal surface has some wear in it, so yeah, again, we'll do 1000, 1500 just to clean up that seal surface area. So yeah, we'll get everything in the hot parts wash. Majority of you guys probably don't have a parts washer, so brake clean and towel as best as you can. So yeah, we'll clean everything up and then we'll be back for assembly. Alright, I was having a really tough time trying to use a punch and punching that last little bit of that roll pin out. So I have this square extractor tool. And this is what I was doing, turning it. And then I got to that point where I could probably pull this thing all the way out. So if you're having the same problem, you can this circle extractor tool might work also. But yeah, that's how I was able to get that last little bit out of there. Alright, so I'll show you guys how I'm gonna polish up that surface. I like to use no gloves with this one because I can use my fingernail or my finger to feel for the change in roughness. So 1000, 1500, just spray some WD-40 as lubricant. And then I got a sponge, so I'll use 1000 first. Go this way. You can see that thing cleaned up pretty well already. I think I'll try to make one more pass, just focusing on that seal area. I can feel with my fingernail. There's one more thing. If this is really bad, you can actually press the bearing on a little higher or a little bit lower. I mean by a certain amount. So that seal is gonna seal in a cleaner spot than if this is really bad right here. The key is you need to make sure that this sits in the middle of that magnet. So too high or too low is bad, but I mean you have a little bit of wiggle room in order to make sure this seal will seal again. So let me do one more pass on this guy. And I'll just focus on that seal area. Okay, that's a lot better, man. This thing, from that seal being so hard, that groove is pretty deep, so I think I'm gonna have to play with the sealing area, but cool. So we'll wipe this off. And then we'll use 1500 just to clean everybody up. And I'll put my fingers right where that seal area is, make sure, because that's the guy that needs the most help. So yeah, this is pretty rough. I'm gonna try to put that seal in a different area, but this is good practice just to clean off any like raised areas or burrs. Again, you're not trying to like machine this thing down, you're just trying to clean up like the raised areas or like the garbage that's on top. So I'll throw this back in the parts washer. We gotta clean that guy a lot too. And then when we come back, we should start assembly. Alright, so we're gonna install the distributor seal. I have a tub of grease. So any oil seal, when you hammer in the seal, sometimes that ring can come out, that spring. So I like to fill in 2 spots with grease. And it's not a big deal because this grease will get washed out with the oil. So I'll fill in those 2 spots. Also lube the inner lip where the shaft is going to go through, and then a little bit on the outside where it's going to get pressed in. So Assassin wants us to use a 14mm socket. So yeah, let's do that. Alright, I have a 14mm deep socket. You can see I put this guy on some wood on the vise so the housing doesn't get damaged. I'll use the back side of this guy. Yeah, I pressed it in with my fingers first just to get it seated. And you can hear that sound change middle on middle where this thing's seated all the way. Alright, I'm gonna call that good. I'll bring this out into the light so you can see, but so there's a couple steps in this casing. So here's a step, that's the second step. The third step, you want the seal to be flush with this third step. So I was putting the socket at the end of this step and hammering in a circle out. When you drive in a seal, you want to hammer on the outside edge, never the inner, or else you'll damage the seal. So the outside edge, until I could hear that sound, and then I physically use my finger to make sure that it's even all around here. So this seal is installed. Let's work on the bearing on the shaft. Alright, so to press this guy on, Assassin suggests a seatbelt washer, because if you look, it's exactly the right size for that guy. If you don't have a seatbelt washer, that's okay, because the center part is like raised higher than the rest of the bearing. You never want to press on the OD of the bearing, always the ID. So if you just had like a regular washer, that's okay, because the washer will be pressing on the ID of the bearing. But seatbelt washer is ideal. So again, we have a reference mark. You see where it's lighter, where the old bearing used to sit. So we'll get close. Our number was 6.63 millimeters. When the bearing's close, we'll take this guy, put it inside, check where this guy sits in relation to the magnet, and that'll determine like the height of this, and then also where the seal will sit against the shaft also. Alright, before I press this on anymore, I took a measurement. It was at like 7.08 before I set this down, but I could tell I was getting close because the shiny spot was you couldn't see the shiny spot anymore where the bearing used to sit. So here's how I had it chucked up: seatbelt bolt, washer, and like that. So I will lubricate the shaft a little bit and then put it inside the distributor housing, and then see where this tooth lines up. Alright, so I'm going into the light so you guys can see, but I lubricated the bottom and then just gently work the shaft down into the seal, and then you can see that guy where it lines up with the magnet. So I can go a hair more lower. I want to see even like a millimeter lower to get that magnet centered with that reluctor tooth. So I'm gonna go a hair lower and we'll come back. Alright, so here's another good reason to use that grease. You can see where the grease ends. That's where the sealing surface is. So it looks like we're not even close to where the that gouge was in this shaft. So that's a good thing. Even if I press it down another mil, we're still not even in that area. So yeah, using the grease both to lubricate the shaft and then as like a marker to see where the shaft is gonna seal now. So pro tip. Alright, so I like where that sits now. I think I ended up being like 6.73, so I'm not gonna try to press it 0.1. That sits well enough in the center. So these retain the distributor bearing. I'm going to put blue Loctite on these screws and then tighten them down with this, and then one hit with the impact screwdriver, and then after that this guy will go on. So we'll come back. Alright, so I got this guy assembled, got the shaft on. So remember this stator pointing up, and then that dot needs to line up also. Sometimes it's hard to get a straight shot, get these things to line up. So when it gets close, you can usually take a punch and like move the shafts around to get the hole to line up. So now we have to put in the roll pin. I'm not gonna mess with like setting this thing up and try to punch this roll pin in, so I'll show you guys how I do it with the vise. So I'll open the vise enough. So I hammered that thing in just to get it set in there. And then there we go. Use the vise to press it the rest of the way. Yeah, you saw it got tight where that was So you want them even on both sides. Oh shit, that was too much. So that's about even. One more thing we can do, squash this guy down in the vise. So what we did there, we just mushroomed out the roll pin, make sure it's not going to back out. But yeah, this looks good. So that's our distributor rebuild video. Make sure this thing still turns freely, no weird noises. Alright, so thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Leave a comment, listen to the Autohaus podcast. Thank you guys for watching. Alright you guys, so I messed up. I was just about to stab the distributor in there. I lined up these two, and I realized if you stab enough distributors, you know this is number 1 on the distributor cap. And then, so this was 180 off. So I took this back off, put it back on, squish this guy again, the roll pin. So yeah, this is the correct way to do it. The top reluctor tooth looks at the magnet, and then on top these two dots have to line up. This is the correct orientation. So don't be like me. Pay attention, don't be like me.